The expectations for the opening two-parter of any Russ T Davies season are markedly different from the expectations surrounding the second two-parter, or even the season finale of the standard series. Just as the expectations for the opening few episodes are different from the expectations for a mid-season standalone. It should go without saying, but it's worth stressing at this point. The opening two-parter of a Davies season isn't meant for the adults in the audience. It's traditionally aimed towards the kids, with big, epic, iconic monsters, ridiculous set pieces, broadly defined settings, and little room for nuance. It's true to say that the Sontaran Strategem and the Poison's Guide to Follow aren't quite as profound or weighty as the Fires of Pompeii or the Planet the Ood that preceded it. Instead, they offer bombastic spectacle, goofy visuals, and a heightened sense of absolutely everything else. In other words, the Sontaran Strategem and the Poison Sky combine to form one of the strongest opening two-parters of the Davies era. They hardly represent a crowning artistic accomplishment for the show, but they do a great job of accomplishing what they set out to do, and it does provide a different touch to Series 4. What's remarkable about the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poison Sky is that despite the scale of the story, the stakes never seem too high. The Sontarans are plotting to destroy the world and kill every man, woman and child living on the surface. And yet there's never really a palpable sense of threat here. Even the episode's cliffhanger seems tacked on here to generate the requisite amount of suspense, as if the entire planet suffocating isn't a strong enough note to end the episode on. Instead, we get Wolf climbing into a car that he knows is emitting toxic gas and gets locked in. He claims that he has to get it off the street, which would be a noble sentiment if every other car on the street wasn't as well emitting toxic gas. More than that, though, the episode ends as the Doctor and Donna frantically try and get Wolf out of a locked car, as the sonic screwdriver proves next to worthless. It's hardly the most impressive of cliffhangers, even before it's solved pretty quickly in the Poison Sky when Sylvia emerges from the house with a fire axe. It seems sort of perfunctory, and this whole two-parter really needed some sort of personal angle on the whole the world suffocates plot, and this is what we got. A lot of what this episode feels like is with a sense that writer Helen Rayner is just checking off a big laundry list of ideas and set pieces and sequences as we get through the first two-part adventure of the season. This probably shouldn't work, as we know from experience. Rayner was handed the story brief from hell when she was tasked with writing Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks, an overstuffed little adventure that seemed packed to the brim with mediocre and occasionally terrible ideas. And yet the Sontaran Stratagem works a lot better, despite a similar amount of high concepts to work through. Part of this is down to the fact that the Sontaran Stratagem seems to have finally figured out what the series has been trying to do with these opening two-part adventures of the series. Aliens of London and World War III, Rise of Cybermen and the Age of Steel, and the Daleks two-parter from last series were all big, bombastic, high-energy adventures, focusing on a whole bunch of toyetic monsters for the BBC marketing team to seize upon. However, the episodes tended to get more cluttered and convoluted when trying to deal with the more adult storytelling elements. These two parts are very clearly aimed at younger viewers. It's worth noting there's nothing wrong with that, per se. The wonderful thing about the revived Doctor Who is it is a family show in the broadest possible sense of the word. Children and adults are able to watch the show together and equally enjoy it. Sometimes they get different things out of different episodes, and sometimes some episodes appeal more to adults more than children, or vice versa. The second two-parter of In a Davies season traditionally deals with more adult fears than the first two-parter of the series. Aliens in London and World War III gave us farting aliens and running pigmen, while The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances deal with sexuality and abandoned children. Daleks in Manhattan and Evolution of the Daleks from last series feature bright and colourful Frankenstein homages and the beloved Pepper Potts, while Human Nature and the Family of Blood explore morality and pacifism and identity. This episode, as the name implies, features a reintroduction of the Sontarans to the modern era. Again, we're seeing evidence that the show is growing more and more comfortable with pushing parts of its legacy and history to the forefront. The revived series has so far resurrected the Daleks, the Cybermen, and now the Master. Once you get past those three, you're very much left introducing second-tier antagonists from the show's run, the characters that will be remembered by particular members of the viewing public, rather than iconic bad guys who've been absorbed into the British popular consciousness. It doesn't seem unfair to concede that the Sontarans aren't iconic. They don't have anywhere near the popular culture cash of the Daleks or the Cybermen or even the Master. They rank alongside Davros and the Silurians and others as aliens an older relative would probably recognise but can't name. Not coincidentally, these are the other two Doctor Who stalwarts that were next to be resurrected for the series, so that kind of works. The Sontarans are a nice memorable visual, but they're really defined by the virtue of never really being that memorable. Their first appearance, the superlative Time Warrior, is better known for introducing the character of Sarah Jane Smith. They appeared in the most middling adventure of Tom Baker's first series, a two-part three-hour adventure story designed to help the season get the requisite number of episodes produced. And then they appeared in The Two Doctors, as well as some other little cameos here and there. They are far from the headline attraction in that episode either. In The Invasion of Time, the reveal that the Sontarans have invaded Gallifrey is a massive disappointment, as viewers can't help but wonder where the Daleks or even the Cybermen are. This episode, the Sontaran Strategem, works because it never tries to force the audience to accept the Sontarans as a genuinely world-class threat. In The Poison Sky, for example, it's revealed that mankind probably wouldn't have defeated the Sontarans using the nuclear weapons, but the Doctor himself foiled that because he didn't want to get the planet involved in nuclear war. The copper excitation field is all that gives the Sontarans an advantage over the unit soldiers, and when they lose that, the battle is turned. Even the Doctor's frustrations and unease over the course of the two-parter are revealed to be something of a ruse, as he eventually explains that he knew clone Martha was a double agent all along, playing right into his hands. There is the occasional moment of what appears to be a genuine desperation on the part of the Doctor, but these are fleeting or later revealed to be staged. The general feeling of the Sontaran Strategem and the later Poison Sky is that the Doctor's not really breaking much sweat here. It's worth noting this episode puts the Doctor through a less intense emotional ringer than the other opening two-parters. He never seems too worried about kidnapped Martha, knowing she's alive somewhere. His worry about Donna leaving is immediately subverted. Even his attempt at self-sacrifice is underplayed rather than overplayed. In a way, this works to the advantage of this episode. Like Partners in Crime, this episode has a lightness of tone that feels welcome when considering some of the heavier episodes surrounding it. Certainly, The Fires of Pompeii or The Planet of the Ood are both episodes that put a heavier emotional strain on the Doctor than anything here. In comparison, this episode is relatively light-hearted, and the Sontarans are a massive part of that. In contrast to last season's opening two-parter with the Daleks, the Sontarans are absurd, and the show embraces that. He's like a potato, one unit officer observes. A baked potato, a talking baked potato. When Stahl first shows up, he's a figure of fun. Is that a reference to my height? He demands after the soldiers make a series of disparaging remarks about him. Playing off Bob Holmes' portrayal of the species, the Sontarans are pretending as overcompensating jocks. They even get the nerdy kid to do their homework for them. The Sontarans are competent though. They can defeat unit soldiers with ease, for example, even though they hardly propels them to the heights of the Doctor's rogues gallery. However, the show never tries to convince us that the Sontarans are anything other than ridiculous. I mean, that's why they appeared in the Sarah Jane Adventures, for God's sake. Though the design of the species has been upgraded a bit, whether you like it or not, it's nowhere near the design overhaul given to the Cybermen to make them more threatening. The script also doesn't bend over backwards to underscore how threatening this ridiculous foe is, like Dalek did. Indeed, while the Daleks and the Master were given gravitas in the revived show by being linked to the Time War, and the Cybermen and the Nest Team were also linked by association, the Sontarans are rather pointedly excluded from Davies' extensive Time War mythology. The finest war in history, and we weren't allowed to be part of it, Stahl admits, feeling just a little bit dejected and let down by the whole experience. The Sontarans don't get to play at the big boys' table after all. It's a very tough balance to get right, playing your bombastic bad guys as something of a joke with completely undermining any threats they may pose. But it's one of the strengths of Doctor Who as a show that the Sontarans can be little more than joke characters, while still posing a credible risk to the planet and our characters. The Sontaran Strategem continues the celebratory feel of the fourth series so far. Not only do we get the return of the Sontarans and Martha, we get a conscious attempt to push Unit front and centre. Granted, Unit have now already appeared a number of times during the Davies era, but they really get a push in this final stretch of episodes. They're bigger players here than they were in Aliens of London or the Christmas Invasion, and they go on to be a big part of Turn Left, The Stolen Earth, and even Planet of the Dead. And rightly so, the Doctor's past with Unit is completely embraced here, right down to the Doctor openly acknowledging the Unit dating controversy. When Donna asks if he used to work for them, the Doctor concedes, yeah, a long time ago, back in the 70s, or was it the 80s? Indeed, the show stresses the links back to that era, with Colonel Mace following up on a thread dating back to the terror of the Zygons, pointing out, technically speaking, you're still on staff, you never resigned. Talking of Mace himself, he seems to be something of a fan, conceding I've read all the files on you, and it's a shame that the character never really returned, even if he was a bit of a transparent stand-in for the Brigadier, who gets an explicit shout-out in The Poison Sky. As much as this episode is about reintroducing the Sontarans, it's also about rehabilitating Unit somewhat, given how prone the organisation is to getting various parts of their anatomy handed to them. Take the Third Doctor's era, for example, many examples. This episode also hints at some sort of internal character conflicts that Davies has been pushing to the forefront of the fourth series. The Doctor is a complex and contradictory figure, and he has been for a lot of the show's run. It's hard to reconcile with the character's anti-authoritarian mindset with his gainful employment as part of the international paramilitary. He's quick to lecture Harriet Jones about the defence of the realm, but he's also quick to miss a subtle coup about the Master. He wouldn't ask Martha Jones to kill, but he'd make her spend a hellish few months as a maid in an early 20th century boarding school. The Doctor is quite happy to hear that Rose has reappropriated Torchwood and is using it to defend Pete's world, but is indignant as Martha's involvement in UNIT. People with guns are usually the enemy in my books, he tells her, before making a snide remark, "You seem quite at home." Martha does get to call the Doctor out on this, arguing, "It's alright for you, you come and go, but some of us have got to stay behind. So I've got to work from the inside, and by making them stay inside, maybe I've got a better chance of making them better." It's a succinct criticism of the Doctor, very much in line with his confession in Planet of the Ood, that he was completely oblivious to the suffering of the Ood during the Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. One of the great things about the Davies era is the fact there's no clear-cut right answer of all of this. The Doctor is quite brilliant, and his moral principles are definitely praiseworthy, but he's also short-sighted and can't often see past the immediate consequences of his own actions. Again, Davies is clearly building towards the 10th Doctor's dramatic fall from grace brilliantly here. And again, we get a sense that Donna is markedly different from the other companions so far on the show. The episode opens with Donna learning to fly the TARDIS, which is the first time we've ever seen a companion do that since the 5th Doctor era. Indeed, the last female companion to learn how to fly the TARDIS was Romana, a character who bears quite similarly to Donna in many ways. Indeed, the dynamic between the 4th Doctor and Romana was very much mother and father to Adric and K9, somewhat similar to how Donna acts towards Martha here. Indeed, while it's good to see Martha again, she does seem somewhat wasted here, but more on that in the Poison Sky review. Overall, there's a lot of fun stuff here, even if the show is still struggling with Martha, even after her departure. Still, the Sontaran Strategem is probably one of the best constructed opening two-parters of the Davies era. It's hardly the most impressive of accomplishments, but it's an episode written with a much clearer purpose, and a much tighter grasp of what it's trying to do, and sets up the next part in style. However, in terms of an overall score, you'll have to wait until next time.
We have an intruder!
How did he get in? In through the window?